This is Miss Renzi, and in this video we're going to learn about annotating and restating a question when we're writing a claim. So if you look at the board behind me, I have written an imaginary question on the board. This is not a question that we're really trying to answer right now. We're just trying to make sure that we understand how to annotate and also how to restate the question when we're trying to answer it. So the first thing to know is, what does it mean to annotate? Annotating means that you're marking up the question in a way that helps you understand it better. Restating a question means answering it using as many of the words from the question as you can. So let's start with the annotation because that comes before the restating. So let's read the question out loud first. The question says, please describe the most important characteristic of the hominid we call Lucy and explain why it was significant. So the first thing that we're going to do when we annotate a question to try and understand it better is we're going to circle any words that we're not sure what they mean. So in this case, one word that we might circle, if we weren't sure what it meant, was a characteristic. That's a word that sixth graders sometimes don't know. Another word that we might circle is our vocabulary word, hominid. A third word that we might circle is the girl's name, Lucy. If you've been following along and present in class, you may know what a Lucy is. But if you haven't, if you've been absent or not paying attention, you might not know what a Lucy is. So that could be a word that we'll circle. And then a final word that some students need to circle is significant. Once we've circled our words, we need to find out what these words mean before we can do anything else. So it's important to take the time and check out what the words mean. In this case, instead of having you look up the words or talk with a friend to find out what the word means, I'm going to go ahead and work through with you what the words mean quickly. Because remember, this is just an example question, so we don't want to spend too much time defining the words, but for you to understand this activity, it will help to know what these words are. So the first word that we circled was characteristic. A characteristic means a quality, something about us. So a characteristic of me is that I'm short. I'm 5'1". That's pretty short for a full-grown woman. A characteristic can be physical, or it can be a personality trait, like a characteristic of me is that I'm curious. Okay. A second vocabulary word that we decided to circle was hominid. A hominid is a human or a human-like animal. So I'm going to repeat that. A hominid is a human, like us, or a human-like animal. And we learned about 4 hominids over the course of this unit. And one of those hominids was Lucy. Lucy, which is the third word, is the oldest hominid. She lived between 4 and 2 million years ago. And Lucy was short, 3 to 4 feet tall. She walked on 2 legs. She was a biped. And she used things around her like rocks and bones to hunt animals. But she didn't turn those rocks and bones into tools by changing them. So that's some important things to know about Lucy. The last word that we circled was significant. And significant is a word you'll see a lot. It just means important. Okay? So we have our 4 words defined. So that's an important part of annotation, is circling the words you don't know. The second stage of annotating is to underline the action words. So we want to find out what you need to do in your answer. So I'm going to underline the 2 action words that I see. Action words are verbs. They're telling you to do something. So, for example, please is not an action word. It doesn't tell you what to do to answer the question. But describe is an action word. We know to describe something means to tell all about it, right? So we've got an action word in describe. We'll underline it. And we're going to look for another action word. Now, call is a verb, but it's not an action word in this claim because it's not telling you something you need to do in the answer. So let's keep reading. When we get to explain, we see that's an action word. We know to explain means something like, tell why something was or how it got to be the way it is. So let's underline explain. So we know we need to do two things in our claim. We know we need to describe something, and we know we need to explain it. Okay. So we've now annotated the question by circling the words that we didn't know, taking care of finding out what they mean, and step 3 is underlining our action words so we know what to do when we're restating. So now we've annotated, check, right? We've done the 3 steps of annotation, the circling, the finding out what the words mean, and the underlining. And now we're ready to move on to the restating. So restating a question means to answer it using as many words from the question as you can while still writing a sentence that makes sense, okay? So we need to answer the question using the words from the question, and we need to still make sense. That's what restating does. 1, 2, 3. All 3 parts of that are part of restating. So if we miss one of those, we haven't really restated. Okay, so let's try to restate this question together. And I'm noticing on the video, the green isn't really showing up the way I want it to, so I'm going to pick a new marker. I'm going to pick this black marker, and maybe that will show up on the camera a little bit more. And I'm going to adjust the camera so that there's a little more space underneath, so you can see right here where I'm writing. I'm a lefty, so if I block the writing while I'm writing, I promise I will get out of the way soon. Okay? So, please describe the most important characteristic. Okay. So when we restate a question, the most important thing we need to do is promise that the essay is going to answer the question. Okay? So we don't want to try to describe everything about Lucy in one sentence. That's the topic of the whole essay. When we restate the question, we're basically promising to do all the things that the question asks us to do. And whatever we can address in the first sentence, we do. But if there's things that are too complicated, it would take too long to explain in one sentence, then we wait and we just promise to do it in the claim. So let's start with the promise that we're going to make to describe. So we could start with this. Well, that black marker is not very good, is it? Try a blue one. Let's start with this essay will describe. So you have to use that action word. That's one of the words from the question that you must use as the action word. So this essay will describe the most important characteristic. Now notice how I'm rewriting all of those words, even though it's a little annoying to rewrite all those words. You want to make sure that you do it because you want to use as many words from the question as you can to make the sentence still make sense. So this essay will describe the most important characteristic of the hominid we call Lucy. And yes, it is important to write all these words. Even though it seems a little bit like a lot of work, you want to make your answer read like somebody wouldn't even need to know the question to know what your essay is about. So if I can read your claim and not even have to guess what my question was, it's a good indicator that you restated the question. And then there's a second action word, it's explain. So you can either make this 2 sentences or you can keep it as 1. I think I'm going to keep it as 1, but if you wanted to, you could put a period here and say, this essay will also explain. I think I'm just going to write and explain why it was significant. Now you've just restated the question if you've written an answer like this. You use tons of words from the question, and specifically the two action words. Those are most important to use. And that's what restating the question is all about. When you're done, you reread the sentence to make sure it, number 3, makes sense. Because if it doesn't make sense, then you need to change the sentence around a little so it does make sense. This essay will describe the most important characteristic of the hominid we call Lucy and explain why it was significant. I can understand what that question means, what that sentence means, so I know I've restated and I've done number 3, makes sense. Now there's a couple of other ways to do this. Sometimes kids tell me, well, don't you want to know what the characteristic is in the claim? And you can do that too if you want. So for example, this could read, this essay will describe the most important characteristic of the hominid we call Lucy was being biped. That's Lucy's most important characteristic, in case you didn't know. That's the answer to the question. It's most important that she was biped. So in this case, the student has answered the question correctly in the claim. Now, if you didn't write that, but you still had an essay all about being a biped, I would know you knew the answer. But writing being biped in the claim is just fine if you want to get it right out there. You know the answer and you want me to know right away. But you could also, if you did this, you would also have to make a new sentence. So you'd have to say, in order for it to make sense, because if I read that the essay will describe the most important characteristic of the hominid we call Lucy was being biped and explain why it was significant, suddenly the sentence is way too long and it doesn't make sense. So if we wrote this, we'd put a period here, we'd cross out the and we'd write, this essay will also explain why it was significant. Okay. So I hope that this video has explained to you a little bit about how you restate a question. The most important things are over here on the side. You need to answer the question, use words from the question, and make sure your answer makes sense. And I hope this video has also taught you how to annotate a question. You circle the words you don't know, you find out what they mean, and then you underline the action words so you know what to do. Okay, hope this has been helpful. Thank you.